Hi guys, welcome to the High Man podcast, hosted by me, Caleb, and Peter. Uh, Today is Monday the 5th September, 10:52 a.m. Welcome. And today we've got my cousin Riain on. He's visiting England for a few days and he said he wouldn't mind joining. Riain, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, how you doing?
Anything about you?
From Ireland, from Sligo. 19 years old, in Manchester playing football.
Lovely stuff. Right, so today's episode, we're doing the big episode about Fredrick Nietzsche. We spoke about him a bit in the previous episodes, but there's a lot to unpack here. So we're going to get into some of his ideas. Anything else, Caleb, about the episode?
I think that's it. It's going to be mainly focused around Nietzsche and morality, and then we'll probably just talk about what we've been doing over the last few weeks, because it's been like 3 weeks since we did an episode or something.
Yeah.
Or around about that. So we've been busy and just been a bit inactive. But yeah.
Back on it now.
Yeah. So. Now we're at uni, like getting into the routine of it, I guess. So hopefully we'll get more frequently done.
Right, so God is dead, famous saying by Nietzsche. So basically the way this came about was basically the way he saw it was there was 3 different stages in the development of like religion and beliefs, where primitive man believed in sort of spirits and gods literally, so, and they try and access that, whether that be through like different rituals or different religious experiences, even psychedelics. They try and directly experience God, and the way they looked at the world was like, I don't know, if there was like a natural disaster, they would say, yeah, God directly did this. So they experienced God directly, and like the sacred directly. And then when organized religions began to grow, mainly focused on Christianity, I think this statement by Nietzsche was about, that it abstracted the sacredness to the afterlife. So although we didn't directly experience it, there was still that structure of values there, but it was one step removed. But the main point was there was still a system of higher values that gave meaning to people's lives. However, in the development of the scientific methods, it created this materialistic and objective worldview that sort of removed the sacredness from the world and made it difficult to believe in a god or anything beyond the material world, which, I think on the surface, a lot of people take this statement, the death of God, out of context and say like it was a statement of celebration. Because obviously we'll get into it more, but Nietzsche wasn't a fan of Christianity. But he certainly didn't say God is dead as like a celebration. Although it does come with a positive that it gives a room for people to come up with their own belief systems, which is something we'll talk about as well. But the issue is with a higher set of values removed, it takes away direct meaning for people's lives that they were previously given by an external source.
Yeah, it's the value system that they follow to give them right meaning. But it doesn't mean that there isn't other value systems, as Nietzsche goes on to describe.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the issue is when the value system is removed, if you don't consciously make an effort to find a new one, then the default turns into nihilism and just a pursuit of pleasure and trying to avoid pain, but it sort of removes the meaning of life there. So that's one. We'll get into more because there's a lot of implications from the death of God when we talk about the higher man and the last man in the herd, that sort of thing, which we'll talk about later. But before that, I wanted to, I think it'd be a good idea to speak about why he didn't like Christianity first, because that gives the element of religion coming to an end, but also the criticism of religion religion itself. So do you want to talk a bit about that, Kaylock?
Yeah, so I did a bit of research on it. And then my main source of information was this YouTube channel called Then and Now. So props to him. He does some good videos on like Nietzsche, and he's done other ones on like just different things. Like he's done one on like Nazism and like different philosophers throughout the ages. So credit's due. Thank you, Then and Now podcast, YouTube channel. Yeah, so he starts saying like good and bad. The etymology of the words good and bad, like the meanings over time have changed. So in the past, like when you have like the nobility, the peasants, let's say, to the nobility, they would define their own strengths as good and what is not strong as bad. Whereas the oppressed would define the strengths of the nobility as evil. And like that kind of gives a dichotomy of morality. So that's where you get like the master v slave morality. So like noble and physically strong people ruled, but then the priestly and the physically weak started to compete with them over time. And Nietzsche argues that like Christianity set up a slave revolt in morality. It seems that like the priestly class inverted the nobility's values and like cast their strengths as weak, as evil, rather than strong as they had defined themselves. And, like these ideas would develop from a place, in Nietzsche's opinion, of like resentment, which he called resentment.
Yeah.
And that's like the reassignment resentment is a reassignment of the pain that accompanies a sense of one's own inferiority/failure onto an external scapegoat. So I'm in a bad position, and this is all the fault of someone else, rather than taking responsibility for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And like, my thoughts on that were, it's a little bit strange, because if there were truly the oppressed and oppressors, then would it not be rational for the victims to place blame on the perpetrators? But then I guess you could argue, even as an oppressed victim, they still have some ability to develop themselves and advance themselves out of their lowly position into a position that holds more authority or power. But like, I don't know, because oppressed and oppressor, you just do get into your mindset victim and wrongdoer. So it's kind of hard to like juggle with this idea of resentment being bad, because it kind of seems like it's just a rational way of thinking.
Well, I spoke about this on the previous episode, or I think it was the second episode, but I think it comes into play here, and it's about Cain and Abel's story, which is fundamentally about resentment. So you're basically responding to the world. It's about how you respond to the world not giving you what you want. So this like slave mindset or whatever or the oppressed mindset is to put the blame upon an oppressor, and to blame external factors for the reason why your life isn't what it could be. But the proper way to approach that would be to take responsibility for the situation you're in and to pursue it yourself. But it's interesting because I bring up a biblical story to make that point, which is one of the stories that Christianity is obviously based on. But like Nietzsche argues that the fundamental Christian morality is the opposite of that. What the story demonstrates.
Point with something that he criticised.
It's what? Sorry.
You sort of supporting Nietzsche's point with something that.
Yeah, so that's what I sort of do struggle to understand or fully agree with Nietzsche's criticism of Christianity, and sort of because it begs the question: is the morals brought up by Christianity completely arbitrary, just based on purely? I mean, you wrote a bit about in the notes about like morality not being based off justice but off power. So there is, but then that, I feel like that comes back to a sort of moral relativist point of view, where you're like, there is no good or there is no bad. It's just who's saying. But I don't know. I'm not sure if Christianity really promotes that it's purely arbitrary. I think there are values that everyone can agree on, but I guess it comes down to a compromise of values, which ones you choose to put on the top.
Yeah, which one do they hold in the highest position?
And yeah, I guess in that sense, that's maybe where this difference between the slave and the master morality comes from, because given the set of values that could be good based on their own biases and what suits them, they'd rather put ones higher up, which makes them look good. So it'd be like selflessness, which is probably a good thing in certain circumstances. Like the slave morality would put that on top, whereas like the noble morality would put like achievement on top, which is achievement's obviously a good thing as well, but they might pick and choose which one's more important to them based on what makes them look the best. So I guess that's and I guess Nietzsche's criticism was that the values that Christianity put on top does miss out a lot of things, and it takes away from the other values that the noble people might have, like being able to like personal achievement. They'll say, well, they've only got that because they've oppressed, so they're degrading people's achievements.
I think Christianity is apparently meant to view any form of power as like a sin, like the seven deadly sins: envy, gluttony, lust, anger, greed, and sloth. Like these sins are individualistic and connected to kind of to like the master morality, that I do what I want. So like the Christian idea of any form of power being a sin kind of takes away from the.
Just like hypocritical, isn't it?
It is a little bit like, how do you kind of advance society without someone taking power over the situation and not making people work? Not necessarily in like a slave master relationship, but someone needs to take power.
Need leaders.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not a utopia.
No, we all live in a hierarchy in every part of our lives.
We'll ever get anything done.
But yeah, it was interesting because apparently, like, there was a religious sentiment, especially a Jewish one, that states only those that suffer are good, and they are the only pious people. Like, they're the only truly religious people. Nietzsche believes like the history of mankind would be. Then it's weird because like Nietzsche says like the history of mankind would be far too stupid, I think, if it had not had the intelligence of the powerless injected into it. Like he kind of like argues that slave morality has an intelligence to it that master morality doesn't, and like that's one thing.
What was his reason for that? Do you know? It has an intelligence to it.
I don't know, like noble morality grows out of a triumphant saying yes to itself. Slave morality says no on the principle to everything that is outside of itself.
Yeah.
Nietzsche thought this was intelligence, but also weakness.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I sort of get the impression it's a thing of like a person being an intellectual or like a rationalist. So they might try and like make arguments about the world and rationalize things about the world, but they're actually less successful about the world. But they're more critical. So they're like maybe more critical thinkers. But yeah, that's maybe that's the reason I see most likely. So
it's weird
to argue that point.
I guess he's kind of suggesting like, what is he suggesting that like the noble and master moralists are limited in their capacity for intelligence? I would kind of disagree, but like after thinking about it, you could argue, like you were saying, like the oppressed have an exclusive viewpoint, and theirs could maybe like take into account other people's, whereas like the master, they would just be kind of doing what they want because they want to do it, not based on what anyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
But then
I don't know. I feel like we're missing something there from what Nietzsche said, because it doesn't make sense to me that you could argue the less successful people is associated with intelligence, because I mean, particularly in modern society, it's the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
But
if you look at the most successful people like in the world now, most of them do come from more less privileged backgrounds. The more privileged you are growing up, the less likely you are to have the ambition and the drive, a different perspective on the world.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
That's.
But then, like, what happens when the person who is a slave has a slave morality? They have that mindset, like you're talking about, and then they eventually become the master. Would they not just eventually like evolve their mindset into the master morality, or do they always keep?
Is the slave morality more like a sort of negative worldview, and the noble morality sort of more optimistic? Yes, I can do that. Or what's?
Yeah, I'd say master morality is more based on I'm doing these things because I want to. These may affect others in a bad way, but they are strong values because I'm at the top, and it's also sort of
nearly narcissistic.
Yeah, and then the slave morality is almost just everything that's outside of my control. Everything is outside my control, and the world's a bad place. Like that's a simple way I understand it.
You put it like pessimistic worldview.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay.
But then you get all these billionaires that come from nothing, and then they all get slated for being like these bosses that take the piss with their workers and not paying wages and all this.
I suppose because you would say that from their initial perspective, you would imagine that they would know how important it is to get paid a fair amount.
Yeah.
So it's the lack of, like, they've obviously changed with the money they've had.
Yeah.
They've compromised to get to that situation. They've changed their values, you would assume, unless their values were like that from the start, which is very strange if you live in a poor house.
It seems to me like those sort of people, their values probably were the same from the start, because they never would have got to that point if they hadn't have chose to be selfish. And had they have decided to slave morality and said everyone at the top is oppressors, there's nothing I can do about it, then they never would have been able to rise to that point. I do struggle to understand why you'd say the like capacity for intelligence of the people with noble morality is limited. But I think there's maybe something we're missing there, something to look into.
Would it be like because they have less world experience?
Usually, got less experience in terms of the other person's experience. Like their experience is still so vast at the top.
But usually, people grow up quicker if they come from underprivileged.
If they have more struggle in their lives,
and that can create the perseverance and the drive and determination that you need to.
But are we just saying this, assuming that the person at the top doesn't have any struggle? Because it doesn't mean it's not necessarily easy at the top, but they're still grinding it out.
There's very different to, like, if you're starting from the bottom and then starting from there, there's a big difference in struggle. I think it's.
Thing is, it's a good point that people like less privileged people often go on to be really successful because they have the ambition and the drive. But I can't see that being an explanation for this, because those people don't have the slave morality, even if they, no matter where they started, there's no way they could. I feel like they couldn't have become successful without like adopting responsibility for their situation and deciding that they can make a change. So even though they come from the less privileged and the class of people that would typically have this slave morality, I don't think I'm not sure. I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Does the slave morality person, because I don't know too much about it, do they think if they're in this situation, I'm in this because of because of everyone else? I can't do anything to get out of it. I'm stuck in a hole. Like there's no way they can be like, it is their fault that I'm here, but I'm here. I can still get out of it, or does that then transfer them into
I think the problem comes actually. I think the problem comes because they identify, as Kayla was saying, they identify their suffering as virtuous. They say, "Oh, because I'm suffering, that makes me a good person." So it'd almost be like they'd have to completely switch their belief system if they wanted to get out of that and to and they see them being in such a shit situation as a sign of selflessness, which also makes them a good person. So I feel like
they attribute their weakness to virtue, and it's like this is what Jordan Peterson says. Like he says, every person needs to be dangerous, and he's not saying you need to be threatening to every person. Yeah, you want to have the capability of being such a dangerous person. You could not kill someone, but having the capability of being dangerous and then controlling it is virtuous, rather than a weak person who has no capability of danger. That doesn't automatically make them virtuous. That just makes them unable to control themselves because they don't know what they can do and what they can't. And it's like the slaves, like they just don't know what they can do because they're in a situation where they're oppressed, and they think that's virtuous. And I think that because they're virtuous, they have the right to like go out and take justice over the people that oppress them, and they say, "Oh, we need to take them down, bring them down to our level." But like, what does that do to anybody?
Bringing themselves up to their
level.
A point I did want to make, because we just spoke about the death of God, but this idea that the Christian value system was inevitably led to the collapse of Christianity because they held truth as the highest virtue. So as time progressed and as science revealed the objective truth about the world, because it was the highest value in Christianity, unless they were to do a full 180, then they can't turn back and start denying the truth. So once the truth came out, they could no longer pretend like
couldn't ignore it because it was part of their highest value.
Yeah.
Do you both agree that God is dead though?
I agree in terms of like he's not. I don't think it's necessary to have religion or a higher power for the idea of like high values.
But for most people, do you think they think that God is dead?
Yeah, I do think so, because people don't like, people have discussions about whether they believe in God or not, but the fact is most people aren't going to church. Most people don't follow a strong religious structure, particularly in the Western world. I don't know what it's like in like Islam countries, or I think they're still more strict with it, and maybe other religions, but I think certainly in the Western world, as a culture, we've lost that fundamental structure.
I mean, it's interesting because I remember I didn't listen to all of it, like Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson have like a discussion about religion. And like Jordan Peterson says like a good point, but it's also like a little bit sneaky. He says like people that don't believe in God, he thinks that innately everyone does if they have this hierarchy of values. Because he argues, like roughly from memory, he argues having that hierarchy of values means you hold something in the highest esteem, and that's like kind of what God is.
Yeah, then, like, I do somewhat agree with that, because I don't think I believe in like a God as like a being somewhere or like anything metaphysical, but when it comes to like everyone, I think maybe it's something fundamental about what is to be a human, that you do have a God, like whatever you like, everyone has a God, whether they choose to identify that as a religious one, that's up to them. But for some people, their God is, well, during the 20th century, lots of people's gods was their political ideologies, which I think Nietzsche did make a comment about how ideologies would replace religion in people's search for a structure. But yeah, maybe everyone has a God. Just depends.
We did the jiu-jitsu competition, but he had like a nice idea. I remember talking about it in like June or July. He was saying he doesn't necessarily believe in a higher power God, but he just believes God is everything. Like God is the ground that you walk on. God is in like every single atom that creates the universe.
Yeah.
And that's what I think. What value does that give a person? Not saying it doesn't give any value to a person, but what value does it give a person to say that God is? Does it give you this kind of sense of oneness with the universe, and like
to say that God is everything?
Yeah, he believes that God is just everything, like in the clothes you wear, it's just everything, like every part, like every atom. It's
Yeah.
basically just God.
I guess.
Yeah.
Do you think?
You can make less of God.
Does that not kind of make less of God?
I mean, you could argue it
everything
does,
that he's not on a pedestal, he just everything.
Yeah.
but then it kind of puts everything on that pedestal, so you respect the world you live in more so.
Or it could go the complete other way and you just have respect for everything less because everything's the same.
Ooh, yeah. Like if you're always happy, how do you know what happiness is if you're never sad?
Yeah.
Well, one way of conceptualizing God would be simply anything outside of your control or nature. So, like in the Bible, you read a story about how. I'm trying to think of the story. Like rather than God's, like the stories where God punishes people for their wrongdoings, you could replace that with nature punishes people for their wrongdoings. For example, if there was a flood that people didn't properly prepare for, then nature will punish them. But you can say, oh, that's just a natural disaster. But had they have prepared for the flood, then it might not have been so bad. So it's nature punishing their wrongdoings of not working towards protecting themselves in the future. But you could just easily replace that with nature as
how do you apply that? How do you apply that, like that example specifically to like someone that was living in 400 BC, when there could be like monsoons and floodings or droughts, but like they didn't even know what the Earth was because they're just kind of like hunter gatherers.
Well, I think there is something. I think particularly in the Old Testament, like there was this this underlying idea that whatever happened, it was their fault. They took complete responsibility for everything that happened. And if something bad happened, they did something wrong. And you can argue, well, obviously shit happens and you can't control it. So how can they do that? But perhaps even though there are things you can't control, to take complete responsibility for everything is still the right response to that.
I guess you could develop it into to feel like you've done the best, you've prepared for everything that you have knowledge of, and then anything that you didn't have knowledge of is outside your control. And like with Stoic philosophy, if it's outside your control, there's no necessity to worry about it.
And I think with that, it's something where, okay, obviously there are some events which are out of your control, but what is always in control is how you respond to those events. So in some sense, you need to take responsibility. Maybe not for everything that happens, but your response to everything that happens. It's a tough one because I don't know. Obviously, people can't fucking prevent floods, or there might be a time where they can never predict it. But I think there is something that is it's maybe the right way to be, to take more responsibility than you really justify.
If you get flooded, I don't think you need to take responsibility for it.
Well, take responsibility for your response. I mean, that's what Pete's saying, which everybody has the ability to do. Whereas some people will have a slave morality and say, "Oh, this fucking flood's happened to me. Fuck this, mate. I'm just gonna have to suffer and be like a weakling." Whereas the master morality would be, "Oh, this has happened. What can I do about it now?"
Well, the point I was trying to make was, I think people who err on the side of responsibility as opposed to erring on the side of that wasn't my fault are generally going to have better lives. But obviously you take it to an extreme and it becomes impractical.
Yeah. Do you think if like the world ended up becoming more secular, like we didn't have like any like governments that were highly influenced by religion, would it be a better place, or would just different ideologies end up taking the place of religion? Like, especially in like Middle Eastern countries where Sharia law is such a big part of their system.
It'd probably be the same, just not called religion.
Right.
I think.
I guess religion and ideology are the same thing. Yeah.
Religion is same from an ideology. Say that word.
How do you? I mean, how do you know an ideology is good then? Is it just not a religion?
I suppose you don't know it's good. You just see it in practice.
Yeah.
Can you live a life without subscribing to an ideology? Or is it inevitable for humans to always believe in some sort of higher power, whether that be a god or a system of values?
I think everyone has their system of values, yeah. So I don't think you could live well unless you, yeah.
But does that system of values have to necessarily be an ideology, or can it kind of just be these like?
But if you have a system of values, that becomes an ideology.
Yeah, I guess it does.
I think well, I feel like ideology is used differently by different people, but the way Jordan Peterson describes an ideology compared to a religion is that an ideology is like it takes like a substructure of religious ideas, but it's not the complete picture. So I'll give you an example. So there's like the archetypal example of there being the wise king and then the oppressive tyrannical king. So these are the two sides of it. But people with like some extreme feminist ideology would ignore the part about the wise king and simply view the control of leaders in the Western world as purely the patriarchy oppressing everyone. But that's denying the wise king, which has provided them with the infrastructure which allows them to live comfortable lives. So that would be an example of an ideology which neglects the bigger picture of like the complete I don't know, the complete idea that religion should really cover all points. And I also think with ideologies, like a lot of them are a lot newer. So what do you trust? The thing that's been around for thousands of years and we're still here, or the thing that someone came up with 20 years ago and wants to run their government based on those ideas? Like, I don't know. So that's another point about it. But I think ideology can be used as just a more general term for a belief system. So you could say religion is an ideology, but it's I guess it's a difference of definitions.
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird.
Okay, we can cut that out. No, I'm not cutting that out.
Like, could you eventually see what's like a modern ideology like feminism, postmodernism, and like other like ideologies? Would they eventually become religions and have like religious followers if you give it like 100 to like 500 years, or is it like would that?
I think maybe the point is they would if they could last, but they never will last because they're incomplete perspective of the world. But that's an interesting one. Would they become religions? Perhaps they would.
Because you know, like, there's that old saying like every religion was just a cult that ended up lasting longer than it should have.
Yeah.
Like you started as a cult and then it ended up just lasting for thousands of years, and now it's just a religion.
Scientology could be a massive religion, but
yeah, Scientology could be like the main religion in 500 years. You never know.
Be mad though.
I don't know.
They're like transfused. You know?
Yeah, it'd be weird. What was I going to say? I was going to say something. I forgot what I was going to say now. But,
I don't know what's the difference between cults and religions, because you could argue. Well, I think there are some distinctions people make. Like, for example, with a cult, you're not allowed to leave. And
well,
with
really?
a cult,
like,
yeah, exactly. Well, it's not so black and white, is it? Because religions is not accepted to leave. And also another argument would be about like the corruption, but obviously there's corruption in religions as well. So it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff there. But,
yes. Yeah. Because yeah, I don't know if like feminism and like it's obviously a fucking great thing, like the first wave of it, and like maybe I haven't really got into
The
detail.
original, the ideology. Yeah, I can't say it.
You can say ideology if you want.
Ideology.
Yeah.
Ideology. Ideology sounds better.
I like ideology because it makes it sound like ideology.
Ideology.
Idiotic and like these are.
The original ideology is.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's just like how long is radical feminism going to be taken over? It just seems to have gone too far.
Yeah, but can you separate radical feminism from an original feminism movement, or because of that has it tainted the entire feminism movement?
I mean, in terms of what the most of the world would think, I'd say that radical feminism is taking the view. But if a person just does a bit of research, they have the ability to understand the differences and like.
I do definitely think there has been a shift in values in the feminist culture compared to the original feminist culture. Because I'll give you an example. Nowadays, the encouragement of like it's seen as empowering for women to like show themselves fucking naked online. They're like, yeah, girl power. If a fucking OG feminist saw that shit, she would not be happy. I reckon so. Yeah, I think there has been a shift. There has been a shift of values to some degree, or maybe a corruption of the original values. I don't know why, but I think it has changed.
It's not even like a corruption of the original values. It's just a fucking new set of values to like that women have come up with, saying this is important. It's like you've just completely gone off the mark of having equal rights in terms of like not exactly. Like in my eyes, there are equal rights that women and men have on the broad basis of things. Obviously, there's like individual differences down to like the biological sex of a woman compared to a man. But radical feminism has just gone so far beyond like having equal votes and equal pay to like this idea that men are just so bad and oppressive that we need to be like weaker.
Do you think most I think the silent majority wouldn't think like that. I think it's just they're just a very loud minority, and I think that saturates everyone's feeds. It's actually not that bad. Most people don't think like that.
Yeah, I do fall of hearing things online and assuming, and I assume that that's how the whole community would speak.
Yeah,
but yeah, I guess I'm wrong there.
Like you talk with most people. I think most people, obviously, you're gonna have disagreements and everything, but I think they're. I don't know. I don't think it's as like you go online, you go on TikTok, and someone's telling you that you should cut your dick off, and it's like,
been there, done that.
You know. But that's not. And then you got people reacting to that in a completely different way, in an incredibly misogynistic way, and it's all just so combative, and actually has a conversation, and it's it's not nice at all, and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
everyone hates each other, but I don't think that's actually how it is.
Yeah,
most people I would call them feminists think like that. I think now the only bad thing about, because it's always saturated in your feed, is you get people like calmly throwing out like, oh, men are shit, and or kill our women, or bitches ain't shit, and stuff like that. And that language is so important. If that language is normalized, it is quite damaging for everyone. If you're constantly being told, you see it all the time, it does eventually, that will affect everyone's viewpoints. And then I think you have to just be careful. So then it's like, do you censor that, or do you not censor it because it has the right to be online?
I'd say not censor it. I don't know, like the point there about language being like important, and then it eventually kind of can program how people think. I mean, it's true to some extent, but I feel like every individual has the ability to look beyond the face value of words and actually look at like people's actions.
Fair.
Because
that kind of brings us into the next part, because in Nietzsche's about the Superman and the last man ideas from Nietzsche. So the bit that reminded me of is, you said obviously every individual has the choice to consider these things for themselves, but I think what Nietzsche came to find was that most people won't do that. Most people will just go with the herd, and they'll just go with social conformity. So in this book, I I struggle to say this. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Sorry, go on.
Well, no, I just said I had a little look at him. Was he from like 1000 BC or something? Is that pretty old, isn't it?
I don't actually know, to be fair, but yeah, Nietzsche wrote, and he said this person. I'll give a brief backstory from what I've seen. I haven't read it, but I watched some videos about it. And basically, this dude, he fucks off to the mountains for like 10 years and stuff, and gains like this enlightenment. And then he thinks, all right, I'm showing up here. I need to go down and start helping other people. And then he starts preaching about how the modern way of life, of just seeking comfort and consumption, is killing like the culture and killing the meaning in people's lives. But then he just these cunts just laugh at him. They just don't understand like the majority. So perhaps the majority of people aren't capable of doing, or not that they're not capable, but they won't. So I'll just go in depth into this now we've moved on. But so basically, this in this Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he talks about the Superman and the last man. Now I think the higher man that we were talking about was very slightly different, but has quite similar values. But it comes back to the idea that in the absence of religion, we've lost the original value system that gave people meaning to their lives. And Zarathustra thought that the problem with losing this was that the higher values gave people of the past the ability to strive towards greatness and to push their cultures forward, whereas absence of that value, society would maybe be doomed to stagnation and collapse without people having the ambition to fulfill the greatness of the high values that they have, because the high values have been stripped of that. So he says that in the face of this, we need to become gods ourselves, in that we, rather than externalizing the creation and the decision of what values are important, we need to do that for ourselves. And this is what's called being the Superman. So yeah, any thoughts on that?
Where do you get the values from, though?
Well, that's the thing, actually, because Jordan Peterson spoke about this point a couple of times, and he said, like, his response, he disagrees with Nietzsche in that we need to create our own values. Rather, he says we need to discover the values, that there are a set of values that already exist, and that by living properly and I guess following your conscience, you can discover them for yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you think values exist like inherently, or?
I think I'd say for humans, I think values, on average, they will exist. For some individuals that are like kind of just biologically psychopathic or whatever, or these like conditions, they might not necessarily have these values inherent in them.
They have values, but they compromise values.
Yeah.
They still have values, though.
Yeah. Well, but every single thing has values. Like animals have values. Like I need to value staying alive by eating another animal, but like the higher values of like truth, sacrifice, and like all these other things, I'd say they are inherent in humans.
Yeah,
but we are quite susceptible to corruption.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing.
Look what everyone lives.
Yeah, I think with morality, you look at it and you think, okay, it's hard to say. Are you still with me? You've frozen. I'll just give it a second. Let me come back. I think I can hear you now. I can't see you. There we go. I think
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. Okay. I'll just carry on anyway. What was I saying? Are you still there? There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
What was I saying?
Yeah, value. Everyone has values, but humans are still susceptible to corruption.
Yeah. So I think, well, it's difficult. So you look at it and you think, okay, can you define what values or what morality is, or do just none exist? Well, I think you can look at that and say, okay, well, it's maybe difficult to define what's good, but you can certainly define what's evil, which you take, like you look at like Nazi Germany or something, the Holocaust. There's absolutely no reasonable moral system you can argue that shit was good in any sort of way. It's absolute evil. And I guess if you can define evil, then there must be a good. So that's sort of my objection to the maybe moral relativist viewpoint of there are no real morals or values, because I think there are some things that are so inherently wrong that you can't really argue that. But when it comes to,
Could you argue that?
Sorry?
Would you be able to argue that? Would you be able to argue that to Hitler? Like, would you be able to argue, killing these millions of Jews and Gypsies and these other like minorities is a terrible thing?
He definitely knew it was a terrible thing.
Did he?
I feel like some part of him had to have known. No, and surely
I think regardless of whether he did or not, whether he was so psychopathic that, or maybe he was so in his ideology he was able to justify it somehow for the greater good. But there's no.
Yeah, even if he still thought it was evil, but he justified it for a good reason.
Psychopaths know what they're doing is wrong. They still relish in the fact that they're doing it. It could have been. He still probably recognized that what he was doing was evil. He just enjoyed it.
But I think even if he didn't believe that, I think it is wrong on some fundamental level, even if his mind is so messed up that I don't think you can argue otherwise.
Great. The Holocaust is definitely bad.
Oh no, I agree. But how would you argue? How would you kind of make someone like Hitler believe that?
That the Holocaust is bad.
I don't know if you can or not, but
I think he probably knew.
I mean, Jordan Peterson says he's never seen a single person in his life get away with lying. Like people lying, I think they get away with it, but it kind of eats away at you slowly. Do you think like Hitler was slowly getting eaten away at in his on a personal level, that eventually he would have just kind of like gone even crazier, or like
what was he lying to himself about?
The fact that killing all these Jews was fundamentally wrong and that he shouldn't do it. Like he might have thought it was wrong, but he thought he should do it.
But he might have thought it was wrong, but still wanted to like relish in the fact that he was doing it.
Yeah,
his brain could have just literally been wired differently. The way his brain processes things in a psychopathic way, it's like this. Oh, I love that this is wrong. I love doing it, so it wouldn't eat away at him.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't classify him. He wouldn't like use him as part of the average of humans that believe in certain values.
No. The average.
Yeah, like on average, I think you believe in a certain amount of values, or like truth and like sacrifice and pleasure and all these other things. But you wouldn't like involve, but you wouldn't include him in that group of averages.
Yeah, but I think it's maybe not even a thing of like what the typical person believes. It's a thing of, regardless of what, it's hard to say, because you can't really say regardless of what anyone believes, because it is a belief. So it's difficult to make absolute claims, but I'll just go on and say it. Regardless of what anyone believes, the unnecessary, deliberate suffering of an innocent person is absolutely wrong in every single way. There are no means that can justify that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's maybe maybe slightly, it's a slightly different topic to what Nietzsche was talking about when it comes to becoming gods and creating our own values. But it seems like it must be related. But another thing, but basically the way I see it was in terms of discovering the values. Like I look at religious stories, and I think like there've been like the Cain and Abel story that I brought up earlier. It's been abstracted. It's been around for so long, and it's been like distilled into the most important thing, and that story is fundamentally true on a level. So that's a story of like this value that has been discovered. Like it wasn't arbitrarily created. There's something fundamental about that story. It's like an archetypal story. So I think those things do exist, and you can't just fucking pluck values out of thin air. But I don't think that's what Nietzsche was saying, that you can just create whatever values you want. So I think maybe it is a thing of, even though Nietzsche says you need to create your own values, perhaps he means you need to realize your own values for your own critical thinking.
That would be great. That'd be great, yeah.
So yeah, so that's the Superman. Let me just...
You're saying that Nietzsche doesn't believe it's possible to become a Superman, that his transformation is too great, but instead acts as bridges to Superman to live as a higher type of human being.
Yeah, of course. No one's perfect.
Yeah, perhaps that's what he's alluding to, that you can't, that it's impossible to do that entirely, but what you can do is you can do whatever you can do, like to become the highest person possible, and by doing that, you actually bridge other people to go further, and everyone's moving up in that situation, apart from the herd, obviously. But yeah, anyway, the last man. Let's talk about the last man a little bit. So this would be the person, the typical response you'd see in the response to the death of God and the absence of meaning in their life, particularly after the scientific revolution, where we're afforded many comforts and entertainment and ability to consume. So people deal with the lack of a higher meaning in their lives by consuming and pursuing pleasure and entertainment. However, this breeds a dissatisfaction and lack of fulfillment in their lives, because they have no higher aspirations or goals, and from this it creates resentment to those that are achieving more and doing better in their lives. I'm still with you. You've paused on my screen. There you go. You're back now.
Yeah, missed about a minute.
Say that again, please.
I was basically just saying what the last man is someone who pursues comfort and entertainment as a way of dealing with the lack of meaning in their lives, but ultimately their lives are made worse, and they're filled with some deep sense of dissatisfaction and unfulfillment, because they don't have the higher meaning, the higher values, the aspirations that give them some fulfillment, and they become resentful of those who do have these higher values.
Yeah, I mean, like Riain just said, that's most people in today's society. Is it possible to even make every person in the world into that? Is it possible to make to take every person in the world onto the path of trying to achieve being a Superman?
It has to be voluntary, doesn't it?
It has to be voluntary. That's the thing. There is no, you can't make someone do it. It has to be a choice they make themselves.
Thanks, from the age of consumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comfort crisis.
Yeah. But you know what you can do? I guess you can fucking try and make as many people possible. Try and do it yourself and try and inspire others to do it themselves. So yeah, it's better. Maybe not everyone will do it, but it's about proving.
And that's why you have like the movement is to, because you need to be able to spread the message, and that's why you have like, you know, what was it? Like no wanking.
Oh, no
fat.
That stuff. The consumption, that's a good thing, I suppose.
How difficult is it to turn? How difficult is it
difficult, I tell you.
To kind of transform and like transcend someone's what's the word for it? Like their outlook on life. How do you? Is it difficult to transform someone from consuming to eventually production, or is it kind of like an innate thing that only certain individuals have?
I think some people have it, some people don't.
I'll agree with that a bit. Can you?
I think some people can go from the original and go from being a complete last man and then to have traits of the Superman, because they always had that in them. But I think some people will just never be able to. It's just not them. It's just not part of them. Some people have it, some people don't.
They're just peasants. No,
I suppose.
I'd like to believe everyone has the capacity to, but the fact is, most people won't. Like, it's within them. I believe everyone has, like, even people who are fucking dumb, like, they have no advantages in their life. They've come from a shit background. Their life is difficult. Like, even them, they can make a decision to take responsibility for that and aim up, regardless of how low they currently are. So I think everyone has capacity for it. Obviously different capacities to achieve different things, but everyone has capacity to aim up. But it's not so easy, especially as you were saying, like in the modern age of consumption, everyone's just on their phones. Like it's so easy to live a life of comfort and consumption that sometimes you might even ask yourself the question, like, why would I even do anything else? But I think, you know, particularly when aiming up can be difficult and you're going against the tide and you're pushing yourself and you're doing things that aren't comfortable, you might ask yourself, well, what's even the point of this? But I think the point comes back to, if you don't do that, then no matter how comfortable you are, no matter how much you're enjoying yourself, you're gonna have an emptiness inside because you don't have that meaning from pursuing the highest values.
Yeah, the rise in depression and all that crack.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? Do you not think that you need like you couldn't have a world full of Supermen or people who had more traits of Superman than not? Do you not think like that would be?
Oh, it makes a hierarchy kind of flip.
Yeah, but it would just go into, like, if you had so many people always, you know, you didn't have people who were just comfortable at that level. It would constantly, you know, there'd be so much. There would be no what's the word? Like it wouldn't. It would. Yeah, there would be no stability because it'd be constantly chopping and changing. You wouldn't have people to do. Like that's I suppose the argument is you can't even get people to work, I suppose, because they're just so consumed and all that. But you need normal people, and then there's going to be people who are going to invent new things, make the you know, start the new businesses.
I think, like you were saying, like it couldn't work if everybody became Superman. Like it couldn't work. But I think the thing is that it's because it's voluntary and it's on the responsibility is on every individual to make that choice. Like some are going to make that choice and some aren't because it's difficult, and you know, it's a battle. Everyone has this battle for themselves, but the fact is some people aren't going to fight the battle. They're going to choose the easy way, and perhaps that's most people, and perhaps it always will be most people. But yeah. So anyway, you had your ideas.
Yeah, Riain was saying if you kind of change the shape of the hierarchy from a pyramid to everyone, not everyone, but a large majority becoming supermen, that would kind of invert it almost, and that will kind of I don't know if you still believe it. You said initially that can make it unstable, but
Yeah, I think it would make
I remember like Peterson talking about what makes a hierarchy unstable is the people at the bottom becoming so disenfranchised that they group together to kind of take down the top. But if everyone is at the top, they're not going to become disenfranchised and become resentful of people above them because they are that people. So that wouldn't could that not create more stability if there's more people at the top?
It could definitely. But my view on it was more so from like, well, I really like biology when I was in school, and you're looking at like pyramids, or what's it called again?
Oh, the food chain.
Food chain, and like obviously it's not the food chain, but there's a name someone who you would say is like one of the biggest supermen on the planet.
Jocko Willink. David Goggins.
Someone with a massive like business, for example.
Oh, Jocko Willink.
Does he have a massive business?
Yeah, it's echelon front where he teaches leadership to these huge companies around the world. While American mainly.
He's there at the top, but if there was tons of Jocko Willink and not people at the bottom for him to explain it to, then he's got no one to explain it to, and then he's no longer at the top, which means they're just starting a new layer.
Well, I think what happens is like when people rise up and they aim up within a hierarchy, it would only end up toppling over like that if there was a ceiling, and for someone to go up, someone else had to go down. But I think like if life was a zero-sum game, it's one way of putting it. But if there's a hierarchy, like as everyone aims up, the hierarchy gets bigger, and I think everyone wins. Everyone can win from that, even people not in the hierarchy, like the tide. Like as the tide, everyone rises with the tide. And yeah, I think to some extent we have seen that like in the world with like people rising out of poverty in like the last 100 to 200 years. I think like 100 years ago, people in England used to live on like less than £1 a day in today equivalent to today's money. Or even like in the 60s and stuff, it might not have been that bad. I don't know the exact numbers, but people lived in poverty, like typical of other places. But the tide takes everyone up.
Yes, the standard of living, even at the lowest level, is so much higher.
Yeah.
But even if
there's massive inequality, but
and that came from the reaction of after World War II. That's why like being poor in England is so much better than being poor in America, because of the systems you put in place after. But like social housing so much better over here, all that stuff.
Yeah,
and it's because of so I suppose it was the dangerous pursuit, and you had to make a difference. So there was the self-transformation. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's whether like if you get everyone in the hierarchy, well, not everyone. If you change the minimum standard of the hierarchy, you kind of initially assume that would make the people at the bottom like happy. But I remember, like you said there, Peter, there's still that level of inequality. Is he still there? Yeah. And like people are so focused on what they have compared to other people rather than what they have compared to people in the past. I remember, like, back to Peterson again, I remember hearing him say like one of the biggest like reasons for crime and like robbery in a certain area is the inequalities rather than the standard of living. Like people in like a really poor area, if everyone is in that area poor, there's going to be like less thieves compared to if there's like a really poor area next to a rich area. Even if that really poor area next to the rich area had a higher level of standard, higher standard level than the really poor area where everyone lives. But like, why can't humans like make it relative in terms of the past rather than the present?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's human.
The brain works.
Can you kind of teach people that, oh, you might not have as much as a person in Dubai, but you've got so much more than your grandparents did?
Yeah.
But that I suppose then that stops them wanting more, using desires and impulses to drive self. Or once you're taking that away from them, then.
What do you mean?
So if you're teaching, like, I suppose it's like good to be grateful, obviously, of the situation you're in compared to someone in a third world country. But I think you have to look at the people around you. Like, just because your situation is better than someone else's doesn't mean it's not a situation you want to get out of. Doesn't mean you have to feel like happy that you're in that situation. You're grateful. And I think I don't know, you can push people into staying in the same place with that sort of mind. I think being resentful can be very useful for a lot of people. Being resentful of someone higher can push you to get higher. Now, of course, it can go the other way.
Yeah,
And you're like,
as long as that resentment isn't the highest value.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think the issue with resentment, like I think the word resentment specifically means you think it's unfair, and if it's unfair, then you're giving it outside your control. You can be jealous of people above you, and that could motivate you. But if you fundamentally believe the system is unfair and rigged against you, then you can't. Which I think is what resentment.
would a lot of people not say that the system is definitely rigged against you? However, you can still get through it. Like, I don't see how that's a bad mindset to have.
Well, I don't think the belief that the system rigged against you will help you at all to rise through it. Or maybe it would motivate you. For some people, it could motivate them more. But
Yeah, I think
maybe, yeah, that's fair.
I think so. Like, I think it would be like it would be sort of wrong to not recognize that the system is rigged against certain people.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, like, they can use that. I don't know. I feel like people can use resentment in a very healthy way. Maybe that's wrong in the exact definition of resentment. I suppose words change over time as well.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like, I'm not happy that someone has a nicer car than me. That makes me, I don't even have a car, but that makes me work harder to want to get a car, to get a nicer car.
Yeah.
Like, it's envy.
I would say that.
Envy, not resentment, isn't it?
Is that not like predicated on like focusing on other people rather than the idea of like, oh, I need to focus on my individual, which is me.
Yeah, and that's probably true, but I just don't think that having resentment is inherently bad. I think it can be used very healthily to better your situation.
But then I kind of that, in my eyes, that kind of goes against like one of Jordan Peterson's rules, which is comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, rather than to someone else's today. And that's
it's a tricky one. It can be. I think it definitely can be helpful to compare yourself to others. But I'm just trying to think about whether resentment is the best way to describe it, because I guess you can still believe it's unfair that they have it, but that can be like, fuck this. This is
maybe
unfair.
it's not resentment.
This is unfair.
Envy.
I'm going to go out and
envy as a tool to.
Yeah.
Envy as a tool to push you forward, like materialistic aims, obviously, in terms of like happiness, probably won't make you feel a great way, but they're still good goals to have, in my opinion. Like I
think when you kind of aim for materialistic goals, that sets you up to go past that, kind of like that sets you up to aim so much further than just living at the minimum standard. So you're going to inevitably be happier. Obviously, once you get past the minimum standard, the materialistic goals aren't going to make you that much happier. But the fact you're aiming for something so high that you're going to inevitably pass the minimum standard, you will be happier.
Yeah, sure. And perhaps having that such lofty goal was kind of what we're talking about with having high values and ambitions being what gives you more meaning in your life. And another thing I will say is, coming back to the point of why can't people compare themselves like to people 100 years ago and say, oh, I'm actually in a good situation. But I think there is something fundamental to human nature about comparing to those around you as a means of, like, I guess it's a status thing. And I think people with, like, it's been shown that people with higher status, although you could argue it's a trivial pursuit, they are actually happier. Like, it is something that makes us happy and improves our lives to have status. But it depends who you're around, because you might, like it might be a thing of you're big fish in the little pond, and then you get to a certain level, and then you end up like you get to a certain level of wealth, and now you look up and you see like all the millionaires and billionaires. You're like, oh shit, like I'm nothing. So it's a game of comparison that can definitely be useful to motivate you. But
I suppose it's like you need a healthy amount of it.
yeah, absolutely.
But your main, like Caleb was saying, your main value has to be, better than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
1% better. Tiny little goals. It's like, oh, I want to be here. So you don't compare yourself to them every day. I want to be here now. Where was I yesterday? What do I need to do today to get closer to there? But that's just the end goal. I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on myself now. I'm not sure if this compares. I don't know. I probably went off topic or.
Well, no, there's no off topic. We're talking about whatever we want.
Okay.
But it's weird, like, because like you should be focused on yourself as an individual, but humans, like not most animals, but like a lot of animals, we're just innately communal species. Like, we grew up in tribes, we evolved to form these massive like civilizations and different societies. Like, it's so innate in us to have human connections with others. So it can be kind of bad to disregard the meaning that others give us in terms of like comparison, and even just meaning in terms of like your happiness. Like, people that don't see other people like a few times a week, and they're just by themselves all the time, they're just definitely not as happy as someone that has interactions with their friends or their family.
Yeah. Also, yeah. Sorry, I'm just thinking. Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think it's just when you meet someone and they go, I don't care what you think about me. That's all they ever say is like, I just don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, that they definitely give a shit. It's like, I think everyone knows that everyone gives a shit what everyone thinks about them. Just
It's just, I guess some people can disregard that. Like, they think to themselves, oh shit, I bet he thinks I'm weird. But then they might think after that, or does it necessarily matter in the grand scheme of things?
Or do they not think? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that kind of leads us into the higher man in the herd. But did you have a point you wanted to say about that? I've lost you, by the way. Hold on, give it a second. There you go.
What I was going to say was, what did you say again? Say that. Say similar.
Oh yeah, so someone might believe, like someone who disregards other people's opinions, they still have the thought process of, oh, I better look weird to this other person when I'm wearing this outfit. But then they have the secondary thought of, that doesn't necessarily matter in the grand scheme of things.
Whereas I think maybe someone does think like that, but it's kind of hard to forget things once you think them. So what that person might think, instead of immediately going to the negative, they might think, that person thought I looked cool because I was wearing this weird outfit. I don't know.
Yeah,
because I feel like as soon as the negative thought comes into your brain, it's negative then.
I think that's true, but then can you reevaluate how much importance you put on that thought? Like, you might think, oh, this negative thoughts come in, but then you could have a secondary thought which also doesn't leave your brain that value, that the importance of that is so minimal compared to other things that are important.
I just know that how the brain works, the negative thought lasts longer than any positive thought.
So it's headlines in the media.
If you don't get the negative thought, if you just get the positive thought, then of course that's better.
Yeah, I guess you need the negative thought to have personal
development.
Development.
But it's the change in mindset of what the other people think. It's going like, everyone's looking at me because I've got, real long ginger hair, or it's like, it looks weird, or everyone's looking at me because I've got fucking sexy ginger hair. Like, it's different. It's a different view, and it's
of the same.
It's the same. It's like the same situation, but it's just a different mindset, and one sort of leads to probably being a little happier, more confident. Being more confident results in more opportunity, more success.
Yeah.
And then which leads to further happiness then. So it's I don't know.
Yeah.
So
you were saying about the high man and the herd, Pete?
Yeah, so we made the point about how like not caring about what the people think. Well, basically, with the higher man and the herds, the higher man has to kind of reject what people of the herd think. A quote that comes to mind about this is, I'm not actually sure who it's by or where it's from, but it's like, I see your boos don't bother me because I've seen what makes you cheer, or something like that. So you see, so you look at people, if people have a certain opinion of you, you think, okay, well, would I actually like to be, do I actually want to be like this person who has this opinion of me, or do they have, or is the values they act out like completely opposite to what I want? So why would I care about the opinion of someone that I don't want to be like? So it's that sort of thing. Which is important, I think, important point when comparing yourself to people, and maybe a way to approach that. But back to the higher man and the herd anyway. So I think, so we spoke about this in one of the previous podcasts where we spoke about the higher man in particular. But I think the Superman is about, they cross over quite a lot, but the Superman is about in response to the death of gods, where do your values come from? And the higher man is more about separating yourself from the herd mindset. So while those things largely cross over, I think the emphasis of the higher man is to, rather than simply following the herd, the social conformity for your morality and the way you view things about the world, you actually critically and consciously consider these things, your opinions for yourself and your values for yourself. And perhaps that is similar to, you know, creating your own values. You're considering it for yourself rather than what most people do, which is uncritically and unconsciously follow whatever the general narrative is. And yeah, so the goal of the higher man is to separate yourself from these people. But within the herd, you have the last man, which is what we were just talking about. They pursue consumption as a means of sort of numbing the lack of meaning in their life. And then you also have, what did he call them? The slave, which is a person who finds himself very resentful towards people who are more successful. And then the higher man, he broke down into two types of people: creative geniuses, who are exceptional people who devote themselves to creating something of beauty and of great value for the world. And then the more prevalent higher human beings who might not be as talented, but they share the similar values of aiming towards, I think the phrase he uses is they have a unifying life goal, where basically they aim for self-actualization, to like become the best possible person they can be and to achieve great things. So that's basically the higher man and the herd, the difference there.
Yeah, I suppose that's different to what I was saying, really, isn't it? It's like ignoring the opinion of others, the herd.
Ignoring the opinion of the majority, because you know their values don't really align with you. But,
and that's fair. I would agree with that as well. So
yeah, but it still kind of supports your point of you can value the opinion of someone that you want to eventually be like. Yeah, like you were saying, Pete. Like why do they care about your booze? Why do they, or how do you say it? Why do they care about your booze?
When I've heard what you cheer for.
Yeah. Your booze don't bother me. I've heard what makes you cheer. Something like that.
Yeah. But if you have like a idol or role model in your life that
wasn't that said in Gladiator? I feel like
it might have been. It might well have been. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking I can just then I suppose it is kind of, it's different, but it is similar.
Yeah.
But I suppose mine was more so it's not the person telling you their opinion, it's just probably what you think about it. It's like people who go out and they think everyone's looking at them. It's like changing the way you think about why people are looking at you. This is more people are saying these things. So it's like if you go online, this is when you go online, for example. Well, I don't know if it is, but this is why I think it is. And someone says like, what
a sexy man you are.
Or the contrast, they say you are, oh my God, you're so bad at everything you do, blah blah blah. And it's like, you don't even have a profile picture.
Yeah.
I can go into what you've liked recently, and it's all just porn stars posts. Like, why would I value what you think of me? You know nothing. But I suppose their negative, having read that negative thought, if you're so saturated, if your feed is so saturated with negative thoughts, it does have a negative impact on you. And that's why you have like sports stars who, they have they nearly get, what's it called? Oh,
It's the process.
No, it's because obviously they're constantly getting berated, and they lose their confidence, and you've seen Space Jam, where it's like they lose their ability. What's it called? There's a specific word for it.
It's like when
but basically it looks like they lose all their skill. It's not that they lose all their skill. As much as they tell themselves that this person's opinion doesn't exist, because they're getting it so often, you're like, if everyone thinks this way, but it's not how everyone thinks. As I said earlier, with if you go online, you see like radical feminists saying like, I don't know, men are toxic, all that. That's not how the average person thinks, but it changes the way you think about how the average person thinks.
Yeah, but then could that eventually, if someone like you were saying, if someone keeps hearing these ideas, for example, like toxic radical feminist ideas, even if they don't believe them, if they hear them enough and see them enough online, would that eventually change their beliefs?
I think so, because I think it would, without them knowing, it would influence their decisions, which would change their beliefs. Like if your brain is constantly, is it the same way you can build muscle, you can rewire your neuroplasticity, you can rewire your brain, and that happens all throughout the day, no matter what. So if you're constantly consuming, consuming that negative stuff, I think part of it does become.
Yeah, I think there is some conditions to be met for neuroplasticity to like be fulfilled. Like I think there's like a few conditions, I can't remember what there is, but there needs to be like the voluntary pursuit of trying to learn something, and then like the deep rest. And I think that's maybe one of the things. But if you just get berated all day with like a radical ideology, and you don't have the voluntary like action of trying to pursue it, would it actually like reprogram it?
I have no scientific basis on this at all.
Either do I. But I feel like you're right.
I think it would if you're constantly exposed to it. Because I think the thing is, like, the way we learn anything is we do an action and we get a response from the world, and then depending whether that response is positive or negative, then it sculpts our behavior. So if you do something and you get 1,000 comments saying, "Oh, you're a dickhead, that was stupid," like it's gonna reprogram you because you put something out and you've got a response.
Even if you have the belief that the only people that actually comment on posts online are all just like haters and low level people.
It's hard for your beliefs, like your higher beliefs, to overcome like your innate, the way that you fucking learn as a human. So it is difficult, but I guess that's why a lot of famous people say, just don't read the comments.
But the herd's so much harder to avoid than it used to be. Right? If you wanted to avoid the herd, you could just run away from the group of people.
But the thing is, the thing about that actually is the herd. It never, like, generally, like hate comments most people get, it's never the majority. It's like, let's say they have, I don't know, 100,000 viewers, they might get 500
nasty comments.
500 negative comments and 10,000 positive comments, but you don't. I guess we also have a negativity bias, so it's difficult to
more people believe it.
Am I still with you?
More good comments than the negative.
There you go. Say that again. So you get 500, but you get 10.
Yeah, you get 500 negative comments, but 1,000 good ones. You're gonna be more offended by the good ones than you are happy about the bad ones. Well, I've said that the wrong way around.
But definitely, I think.
But because we have a negativity bias, but like you see 500 negative comments, the way our brain interprets that as it's as if there's a mob of 500 people standing on the fucking street outside your house.
And it's never 1,000 people going.
Yeah,
Like
the positive comments don't really register.
Yeah, I suppose the higher man doesn't even care about what anyone says. I just don't think that's realistic.
Yeah. Interesting.
No, but he does care what people think, actually. He just cares about...
Right, he cares what he thinks.
No, but he also cares about what certain people think. The people that he holds up on the pedestal, he cares what they think. No?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Well, it's big. How do you say his name again?
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche.
I think it's Nietzsche.
It's Nietzsche. Nietzsche.
I
No.
heard some dude saying you're supposed to say it Nietzsche, but I just don't believe that. I think it's Nietzsche.
Was he Austrian or something?
Austrian,
Or
yeah.
German?
Austrian. Yeah.
Nietzsche. I think it's Nietzsche.
He's German.
I just say Nietzsche. He's German, yeah.
Not German. Yeah. Austrian, German.
But yeah, I'm not sure.
Any other thoughts on Nietzsche? Anything he says?
Yeah, overall, good bloke.
I'd say so. I mean, there's a big, I don't know how big it is, but like Nietzsche's like kind of thoughts on morality have been propagated by like kind of far right people who are like very authoritarian, because he values so much punishment, like suffering, and not necessarily punishment for no reason. Like he believes like humans developed differently from animals because we have the ability to like make promises. I will and I will do, and that in that relationship, I will and I will do, you have a creditor and a debtor. Like I make you a promise, therefore I should fulfill it. And in like Nietzsche's eyes, you need to make sure that those promises are fulfilled, otherwise like system of society breaks down. And the only way to motivate people to keep their promises is to make sure that they see other people suffer when they break their promises. And he's got a quote, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's called the highest form of pleasure. To make someone suffer is a pleasure in its highest form. And like he sees it as a necessity, although it's
True feast.
Yeah, it's a true feast, he says. And like, he sees it as a necessity. It is an extremity, but he thinks like we need to have things. He said like we need to have a thing must be burnt in our memories so that it stays in our memory, because only something which continues to hurt stays in the memory. It's like how far do you take that? Like
that is the question. How far do you take it? Because it's the tension between the virtues of mercy and justice, and perhaps Nietzsche believes you should take justice all the way.
Singapore is really clean.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So it depends what the values of your country are, and the values you personally are.
Yeah.
Singapore is meant to be really clean.
I think it was necessary when we kind of were like actually forming like real civilizations compared to like when we kind of got like advanced from tribes to huge communities of thousands of people and then like tens of thousands of people. I think it wasn't like necessary. But now that we're in a like point in time where humans understand like wrong and right, do punishments need to be the highest form of pleasure?
I don't think. No, I think what he's saying there is just a bit sick. Like people sometimes deserve punishment for what they've done, but you shouldn't maybe take pleasure in it.
Yeah.
But then I guess you're not taking pleasure in the punishment, you're taking pleasure in the act of securing people in promises and making sure that society functions, because society is just, I will do this and you do this for me. Like I work, you pay me.
A necessary evil.
Yeah, a necessary evil.
But is that what he's saying? To me, and of course that's the quote taken. That's just that singular quote. That looks like he's going, I kind of enjoy that we get to cut this person's hands off because they did this.
I don't think he is trying to say that. I think he's trying to say it's pleasure in its highest form, because this necessary evil has allowed us to enter civilized. It's allowed us to enter civilized society. So this necessity is pleasure because we get the pleasure of civilized society.
He takes pleasure in doing the punishment because he knows it creates the society that he wants.
Not necessarily pleasure punishment, but pleasure in the outcome of the punishment.
But he's taking pleasure in the act because he knows what the act
Yeah,
rewards. Yeah, no, okay, I get that. I get that. It just, I don't know. I suppose you read it on face value, it just looks like he's.
Yeah, well, this is what
I feel like we are missing something there. There's probably a lot more to this point.
Yeah, all my research is from like YouTube videos, and this guy, he seems pretty into it, but I saw some other videos which were like 3 or 4 times as long about the same topic. So this is a bit condensed.
Is this from his book Will to Power?
I think this was it wasn't that book. I know
because that's the one like I didn't really, because I looked into more of the like the higher man and the Übermensch type stuff.
I think
whereas I didn't look so much into this one. So I wasn't sure what book it was from.
It was an essay. It was the essay Morality. It was called The Geniality of Morality. That was it. Yeah, something like that. It was something along those lines.
Yeah, it was just a bit in I think in the notes, because it describes. I'm just looking at what the Will to Power is about now, and it says the Will to Power describes what Nietzsche may have believed to be the main driving force for humans, which would be power. And somewhere in your notes it was like power. Was it power is more important, more valued than justice, or something like that? So I wasn't sure if it related to this book, but yeah, I feel like looking into Nietzsche in preparation for this episode, because we spoke about him a little bit before, but just looking into him makes me think, makes me realise how little I know about him. So, so yeah, maybe down the line we'll do like one of his books in particular to try and go into a bit more depth here, because there's definitely stuff we're missing, but I think we had good conversation about some of the important points he makes. So yeah, do you want to? We've got 5 minutes left or 6 minutes left on this recording. Should we wrap it up now?
Yeah. Anything else we want to say?
Closing thoughts?
Well, my closing thoughts on this was like I feel like Nietzsche is holding the individual as a priority rather than the herd. But then, like in my eyes, humans are biologically herd animals. So like, how far do you take that? I guess if you advance the individual so much, it will inevitably be for the betterment of the herd. But yeah, that's a weird.
Herds need shepherds.
Herds need shepherds. That's very true.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think maybe his point wasn't that we should neglect other people, but it's that like it wasn't an argument between improving oneself and leading the herd or helping the herd. It was that you're a member of the herd, you're just mindlessly following, as opposed to actualizing your own potential. And I think perhaps the way you can do the most good in the world is by becoming the best person you can be, and you'll do that through actualizing your potential and aiming towards high values, not mindlessly consuming or being envious and resentful.
Yeah.
I think envy is a tool that can be used. Oh, sorry.
Of course, yeah. But I think, the point I was making, not like using it as a motivational factor, but using it as as an excuse to tear down the people at the top out of envy.
Yeah.
Because I think the point is people in the herd, like, they don't admit that they see their lowly position as virtuous. They don't see the high position as virtuous and use that as use the envy as motivation to get to the top. They envy it, but they disguise it. And there's a quote from him where he's like, people disguise their envy for successful people. This is paraphrasing, but they disguise their envy with calls for equality.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of the point.
It's a completely different mentality, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Because I think using envy as motivation goes back to taking responsibility, and it goes back to having a set of values that you want to aim for. And
it's nearly taking the negative connotation out of envy as well.
Yeah.
Because envy does have a negative connotation to it in language.
But obviously, as you were saying, it's absolutely a powerful motivational factor, which maybe should be leveraged.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What's your closing like little speech? Like?
Oh, we just say the time again. I mean, and yeah, we'll try and do a podcast maybe where I'll go to Leeds or you come to Manchester, then like next week or the week after before uni starts.
Yeah.
And I've got no competitions booked for later this year yet. I don't know if we'll finish.
I have a few. I've got one in Manchester actually. I was meaning to tell you, so I could.
Yeah, what date is it? Well, tell me the date after, and I will. Step.
Yeah. We'll sort it. It's in October at some point. I'm doing one near Leeds in September as well.
Are you in Leeds Beckett?
No, uni of.
That's a good one, isn't it? Leeds Beckett is the.
Is that
it's like the party one, yeah.
He's did his masters.
Oh shit! What in?
Mechanical engineering.
Oh, interesting. Fair.
Yeah.
Right, anyway, should we wrap up the episode, man? Because I feel like more talking now. Go on.
One more thing. I'm going to see Jordan Peterson live in 2 days' time. Sister.
Oh, wow,
yeah. So I'll probably. I don't know if I can be asked to take notes there or just like watch a video of it after. Take notes because that's what I want to take it all in.
Oh, that's wicked.
But yeah,
I'm jealous.
That's an interesting idea to talk about, hopefully. Which you'll probably be able to relate to because you've read a second book.
He said he's envious of you.
Yes, you should be. Get a ticket.
Get a ticket.
I need to make some money so I can afford to go to.
Well, he gets a ticket, or the other person burns your ticket.
Ooh, or he kills me and takes my.
Burn it down. I can't go. No one can go.
All right. Let's just shut shit down.
Right. Thank you everyone for watching.
The time is 12:35 p.m. Going just under 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours. We'll see you next time, I guess. Thanks everyone for coming on.
Pleasure.
Brilliant guest, actually. Very good. Good conversation.
Nice. Let's keep going again.
You started with.
Right.
I'm a bit envious.
See you in the next episode.
Right.